Good evening. Good evening. I'm audible, I'm visible. Good evening to all of you. Good evening. Great. No, Sunil, you can revise with me. Why not? Thank you, Abhishek. Means a lot. Kishan, refresh. Refresh. AB, ADBC, if you want to, why not? We've covered us at least 5 to 10%. Why not? Yes, yes, Saifruddin. Everything given here you can write a mains answer also. Thank you, Vamsi. Thank you. We'll discuss. Subrana, we'll discuss that. I would say that you start with the NCRTs and then go to anything else. Yeah. Subrata, I will discuss everything with you. Today we have a very interesting discussion, a whole series of events we have to understand, and we will finish economic history today. So yeah. Thank you, Annie. The SMEs can push the article link again if you're hearing me, SMEs, please. And it would be under your dashboard on, if you go to 8th February, it will automatically show in your resources. As it is, tomorrow we will be doing previous year questions. You'll get an idea of better things. Good evening. We'll wait for 1 to 2 minutes more and then we'll begin. Consolidation means to bring everything together, is to. Neil, you first do Bipin. Rahul, I will discuss with you prelims and mains previous year questions together. Don't worry about that. I can, Nitesh. Push the yesterday's link also. Tanu, what I'm doing is already covering NCRT and then going up. Khadija, just refresh once. I can't see your question. Basit, don't worry. Just follow the PPTs. Okay. So, yesterday we discussed an important concept, which is that we were able to understand, we were able to really understand the concept of expansion. We did the trick related to the wars. We've now created a basic understanding. We've expanded the British and we entered into the economic zone. Today, we will be discussing what we call as economy in a lot of detail. We have to understand land revenue, then thereafter commercialization, deindustrialization, and drain of wealth, how these four are related to each other, and also understand if you basically have to develop an understanding with regards to how India got economically exploited, because the original and the real purpose of the British in India was economic exploitation. That should be enough, Devansh. So basically, we need to understand is what are the channels of exploitation. And yesterday we saw that basically the revenue was not just picked up from India and taken to England. It was rather a much diverse process, a much nuanced process, a much more what we call a sophisticated process of sending it, because first they bought what they wanted in India, send it, and also took what they wanted from China via smuggling, and therefore creating what is called the triangular trade. But the first point we need to understand is very simply, the first point itself is how did the British get that revenue? That's a very important point we needed to see. And what we saw was that when it came to Clive, he has a very standard policy. Clive's policy is very simple. I will not invest in anything. I will only exploit it. And he follows what is called a hands-off policy, and therefore just simply takes whatever is there via European supervisors, And once European supervisors started to enter into the economy of Bengal, it led to a devastating famine rather, in the 670 period, 69-70 period. And basically, this will be in turn be a very big question which the East India Company will ask Clive, that why were you not able to give us consistent and what we call as predictable income? And he will scapegoat, or he will say that the reason is that Reza Khan is very, very corrupt, and Reza Khan will be removed in the process of Clive's own corruption, and therefore the company will take both the Nizamat and the Diwani functions. And then will come Warren Hastings. When we were discussing Warren Hastings, now I will again discuss Hastings, what is called farming out system or farming system, Ijdari system again. Can we just revise farming system and actually go to permanent settlement, which is the most important discussion we have for today? Permanent Rayat Wali Mahalwari, commercialization, deindustrialization, drain of wealth. This is what we have to cover today. And let's try to create a logical interpretation and the connection between all of them. So what is the farming system? In farming system, basically the British district collector was the collector, as it says, his name itself says collector. He is the collector of revenue. He is the ultimate repository of revenue. He is also the ultimate owner of all land. So basically, he is the owner of all land. He is the owner of all land. And what he auctions or how he collects revenue is by basically what is called auctioning the right to collect revenue. And he does that by giving it to the highest bidder, and the highest bidder therefore would say that I can give you this said amount of income from a given amount of land. And basically they were able to create a chain of high bidders or chain of personals or intermediaries who are ready to go to the countryside, collect tax and give it to the district collector. However, the problem of the story is that because you're auctioning it to the highest bidder, you overexploit. You overexploit at a point where it will become so much that you cannot actually sustain the model. And Warren Hastings' model is again going to more or less destroy the economy of Bengal again. And now that the farming system, the Ijdari system was not working, a person called Lord Cornwallis will be sent to India, and he will be given two basic mandates. Highest bidder means I can get you the maximum amount of revenue. It's just the concept that if there is 10 acres, one person says I can give you 500 rupees, B can say I can give you 1000, and C says I can give you 800. So it would be given to B, and B would go and collect the revenue. But because he has to give a said amount to the British, he would try to extract more than what was there. Now, Lord Cornwallis, in that sense, was given a mandate by the East India Company Court of Directors, go and give us consistent income. We want consistent income. They want consistent income. Why? What is the reason why they want consistent, predictable income? You tell me. What is the reason for that? Very good, which is that they have to pay the investors, they have to give dividend. Therefore, there has to be a certain non-fluctuation in the dividend, because that would also decide the share price of the stock of East India Company. East India Company is answerable to the market, to the stock market. Therefore, they need to find a solution to the problem called unpredictability. So now can we discuss, if everybody is with me with farming system, which was more or less disbanded, can we now finally discuss permanent settlement, because that is what is the most important and the worst of all in all of the stories. So Cornwallis lands in India 1798. He has now been given the mandate, find a solution to the problem. Find a solution to the problem. Now I want the district collector is the owner of all land. Now please return to me. What I want from you is you have to concentrate right now, and please have to understand this. I will create a scenario in front of you, and you will automatically create the permanent settlement for me, right? So this is the following scenario. This is Bengal. Once we understand the basic concept, I will give you the basic details of it. So this is Bengal, right? This is Bengal. Now, there are, for example, different villages, and in this village, there is one big zamindar, and there are close to 50 to 60 peasants. What is a peasant? A peasant is nothing but a farmer. He's a farmer. Basically, he owns his own land, but not a lot of land. So there's one zamindar here and 50 to 60 peasants. In this Suba, what you want to say, there are 2 zamindars and there are 100 peasants. In this, there are 4 zamindars and close to 50 peasants. In this, there is again division, 1 zamindar and 100 peasants. So basically, zamindar owns his own land. He's a landlord, has a lot of land. Zamindar and peasant have smaller lands. Are you getting the difference between these two? Zamindar is a big landowner, has 50, 60 acres, but the peasant would have small. Okay. Now, let's take the example for this. This has 5 zamindars and 300 peasants. This has 3 zamindars and 1000 peasants. This has 1 zamindar and 10 peasants. And for example, this has 2 zamindars and 400 peasants. So these are basically different parganas, or what you want to call as the different districts of Bengal. And now Cornwallis has to collect tax. Now first tell me one thing. Is all the land in Bengal owned by zamindars? Yes or no? No, because zamindars own a certain amount of land and the peasants own their certain amount of land. Maybe, for example, zamindars could own cumulatively for example, 1000 acres, but still the peasants, these small peasants, own 300 acres. They do own something. So something is with the peasant. Peasant is a farmer. He is the owner of his own land. Now Cornwallis sees this whole landscape and thinks, how should I collect tax? Because if I'm giving it to the highest bidder, he is firstly not able to pay me or anything. I need to find I need to go to the grassroots level and find one social category which I can settle with. That is why they are called settlement. Permanent, Rayatwari and Mahalwari settlements. It's what, who do you settle the tax with? Now, Cornwallis himself is a zamindar. Himself is a landowner in England, comes from a very rich family. So he already has a bias towards zamindars. He believes that zamindars are the real power centers of Bengal. That may be true in that sense. But you tell me, is it easier to settle with, for example, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6, 11, 11 and 2, 13, 13 and 1, 14, 15, 19. Is it easier to settle with 19 zamindars or with the other close to 1000 peasants? Which is easier? The zamindar? It is easier to basically settle with the 19 zamindars. So Cornwallis now has an idea. Cornwallis now has an idea. And the idea is, let's do one thing. Let us settle, or let us make the zamindar our tax collector. Our tax collector. But the problem in his system is, as soon as zamindar is given the power to collect taxes, he is also transferred temporarily land ownership of all land. Basically, this, for example, in this Pargana, as soon as the Cornwallis system comes through, that one zamindar would technically become the landowner of all of it. So what will happen to the peasant? What will happen to the peasant? The peasant loses all his customary rights and all his property rights, and now the zamindar is considered the only landowner there. So the permanent settlement is called zamindari system because it dispossesses the peasant of their right to ownership, and straight away says the zamindar is the ultimate landowner and we will collect tax from him. So basically, the zamindar becomes the zamindar of this whole territory, and all of these peasants become tenants. Tenants means that they are now working for landless farmers. Now they are working for the zamindar on their own land which they owned. But the British is not ready to accept or recognize their ownership. Is not ready to recognize or accept their ownership. Now, in a place, for example, like this, 3 zamindars will now be owning all the land temporarily. Listen to this word, temporarily, because there's a condition, and 1,000 peasantry will become landless. Instantly landless. So, what is the permanent settlement? The district collector collects the revenue from zamindars who are given temporary ownership of the land in return for tax collection. Peasants, I'll tell you why temporary. Peasants lose their right to ownership, and this is the basic model. He thought it is easier. What does the farmer get? The British are not here to do welfare. They are here to exploit. Remove this innocence. The British don't care. The zamindars will automatically become the owner of land, and the peasants will be dispossessed of their rights. This basic model was based on Cornwallis's own bias. He thought rather settle with less than to settle with numerous. And he himself was the landlord, so he thought that landlords are the real people of the town. But why do I say that it is temporary? Can I tell you why temporary? District collector is always a European. Can I explain to you why temporary? It is temporary because if the zamindar is not able to pay the assigned tax, the land will be taken away from him and auctioned to the next highest bidder for ownership. For example, Zamindar was said, give me 1,000 rupees. This is called sunset law. You have to pay 1,000 rupees to the district collector on 9th February 2023. But I am not able to produce that 1,000 rupees by sunset, which is 6 o'clock. So the district collector will say, you have defaulted. I take your ownership. And now the district collector will say, who wants this ownership? I want it. Take it, 1,000 rupees, next round. Are you getting my point? Why it is Zamindar or why it is the temporary? Basically, in this system, there's an illusion of private property. Who ultimately owns land? Who ultimately owns the land? The English. The collector still owns the land. He is only temporarily passing on ownership. So first, do you understand the structure? Because there's something more to this system also, which is what is the rate of taxation? Simple point is, there is a whole plethora of zamindars and peasants in Bengal. The Cornwallis says, why go with the so many of them? We'll go to the zamindars. Let us give them ownership illusion. They will collect tax for us, and peasants are automatically going to lose all ownership. Customary rights, all rights gone. All peasants become tenant, and the worst part of the story is if there is pressure on the zamindar to give tax, who will the zamindar exploit? Zamindar, peasant, all are Indian. Only the district collector is European. He will exploit the peasant. So the peasant ultimately loses his land, has no ownership right, and is also the one who's getting exploited. But the zamindar thinks that he's oversmart. He thinks that he can outsmart the British. So there is a clause called the sunset law, under which if you don't pay up the tax on a certain date, the ownership right is taken away from you and given to the next person who's ready to take it. Do you understand? The sunset clauses, everything is written in the PPT. This is called sunset law. Sunset clause. That if you don't pay the money on a designated day, your right to ownership will be taken away. Right to ownership will be taken away. What did the peasant do? As of right now, he is just a silent exploited class. They will rebel, but not right now. So is the basic structure clear? Because if this basic structure is clear, I want to add another detail to it. Are you understanding? First tell me, are you understanding the logic with going with zamindars? First tell me. Everybody is going to tell me this. Yes? Why should the peasant give his land to the British? That is not the constitutional question. There's no fundamental rights at this point of time. The peasant has to give it. That is the way it works. So basic point is, zamindar is chosen as the one to collect taxes. Temporary right of ownership is given. District collector will ask the zamindar to pay a tax on a certain date. If you don't pay it, the land ownership will be taken away. Therefore, in the whole system, there's an illusion of private property, but the ultimate owner is still the district collector. Can we agree to this? The land of the peasant is already automatically taken away. Zamindar, it can be taken away if he does not pay up on the date. Right? Can I add the next detail with relates to why do we call it permanent settlement? And basically because the Mughals gave the English East India Company Diwani. Diwani means that right to collect taxation also meant that they are the owners of land in a way. This is all basically over exploitation of their right. The British, see, three things I want to be very, very clear with you. British don't care. They are here to exploit and stop being innocent. The innocence in you says that why didn't the peasant say anything? Who does he say it to? Who does he say it to? Tell me. Where will he go? He will go to the Mughal emperor who's useless. Put yourself in the shoes of the peasant. He has always looked up to the Mughals. The British come, they introduce a new system. The new system, very shortly, again, I'm repeating myself. Simple point is, permanent settlement is the concept of settling with the zamindars of Bengal in order to collect the taxes. Zamindars were given ownership rights, however, under conditions. Peasants automatically lose all their ownership right under the permanent settlement. They are made into landless tenants or landless labor in a way. And under this clause, if a zamindar is not able to pay a tax on a certain date, his right to ownership will be taken away and given away to a second person. Tell me, how is farming system of Hastings different from Cornwallis? You tell me. Can't he go to Nazim's court? You think that Nazim Reza Khan can do anything? The British are there. Yes. The major difference between Hastings and Cornwallis is Hastings used to give away right to collect revenue. Here, the right to ownership is given, temporary ownership. That temporary ownership gives you an illusion of power, but that power still resides with the district collector. Basic structure, again repeating myself, third time, last time. The district collector will collect the tax from the zamindar. The zamindar will collect it from the peasant who has now become a landless tenant. And the basic cost concept is zamindar's right to ownership is only temporary or is subject to the condition that he is able to pay tax on a designated date. Are we clear? Because then I add why it is called permanent settlement. Understood? Everybody has to say yes, then I move forward. There should be no doubt. There's nothing here. Very easy system. Now, see, I'll read it out later. Let me add the second detail. Why is it called permanent settlement? It's called permanent settlement because of the rate of taxation. Now you will see why it will be so hard for the zamindars. See, what does the British need in this system? When it comes to revenue, what is that one word they need? They want certainty. They want exact money every year. So now what the concept was, when the district collector used to go to and meet the zamindar, he used to say that, see, we are permanently fixing our share, which is that we will take 10/11th of the land revenue and 1/11th will be for your own expense. So basically, for example, there's a tract in which there is one zamindar and he has been given the zamindari of this area, or he goes into permanent settlement. And this area, the British say that we believe that it can produce 11,000 rupees as the revenue. 11,000 rupees as revenue. So 10,000 will go to the British and 1,000 will go to the zamindar. And the British would say that, see, you have to pay 10,000 forever. If this revenue increases to 12,000, you get 2,000. We will still take 10,000. By fixing it forever, what does the British get out of this system? You know the word. By fixing it forever, what does the British get out of the system? Certainty. They know that we will get 10,000 for sure. Zamindar, if he wants, he will try to increase the yield or squeeze the peasant to get extra, because his 1/11th changes according to what is the base revenue in that sense. But this revenue is decided by the British. The British say that according to the data which we see in this quote, we believe that you can produce 11,000. So we will put it at 10,000. We'll put it at 10,000. If we do the maths, what is the rate of taxation in percentage? What is the rate of taxation in percentage? Divide 10 by 11. It's approximately 90%. And in India, in India, never has the state, even the Mughals, asked for 90%. Mughals asked half, 50%, 1/3, 1/4, 1/6, 1/10. They are asking for close to 90 to 91% of the revenue. This is the British being greedy and being the real British in India. But the worst part of this system is, if the British will fix the revenue forever, listen to me, if the British will fix the revenue forever, will they fix it at the highest or at the average? They will fix it at the highest. And herein comes the problem. The British over-assessed like anything and created unrealistic demand for the zamindar. Therefore, either the zamindars were able to meet it, but their 1/11th never changed, or they themselves were never able to pay, and under sunset clause, it was given to someone else. So if I bring these two things together, I give you the permanent settlement. Can I do this to you? I've told you the structure and I've told you the rate of taxation. Can I bring these two things together? I can do that? Great. Perfect. So what is the permanent settlement? The permanent settlement is nothing but the system in which the district collector settles with the zamindars as the owners of land and tax collecting rights. The rate of taxation is fixed at 10/11th and 1/11th for the British and for the zamindar. If the tax designated and fixed forever isn't paid on due date, ownership and right to collect tax will be auctioned to the next highest bidder. And this is the basic system. You are asking me what does the profit, what is the zamindar's profit? Zero. The British ultimately were getting everything. The basic point here is ownership is temporarily with whom? Is with whom? 10/11th of the total revenue. 10/11th. I'll give you a working example of this also. Zamindar. Please remember this for the prelims examination. What is rate of taxation? Rate of taxation is 90%. Please remember this point. Please remember this point. I'll give you a very simple example. I'll give you an example and then move to Rayatwari and why this system is bad. I'll tell you that. See, simple point. This is a land. This is a land. I, Zamindar, take this land under, I've been given the task of collecting the revenue out of this. I'm a Zamindar. The British say that as per our data, this land produces 100 kgs of wheat every year, and the going rate of wheat is 110 rupees. So basically, the total amount of yield, productivity plus whatever revenue can be generated is 11,000 rupees. So because this is the real potential, this is the total revenue which can come. We will take 10/11th and 1/11th you will take. So 10,000 you will keep, 1,000 you will keep, 10,000 we will keep. Now, what is the problem in this system? You understand, you already know it. Does the yield remain the same every year? Does the yield remain the same every year? No? Now, irrespective of the yield, this will never change. So 1 year they produce 90 kgs, but still 10,000 needs to be given. The 1 year it produces 20 to 120 kgs. That year the Zamindar gets 10,000 and he gets 2,000. But next year it was only 80 kgs. So now again he's in a loss. Basically the amount is fixed at such a high point that the British are always in an advantage. Don't try to look for goods here. Zamindar is also getting fooled as much as the peasant is losing everything. Ultimately, that 11,000 rupees will be generated out of the peasant. That is why permanent settlement is considered the worst system of all of them, because the peasant only had the task of giving money to the Zamindar. And if the Zamindar is under burden, he will transfer it to the peasant. Is this system now clear? Why do the Zamindars go into this system? Because they don't have an option. Please understand this. We live in democracy. We have options. There's no other option. And I will tell you what this will in turn lead to. Basic point is, do the Zamindars gain? No. Zero. Not. Squat. And do the peasants gain anything? Zero. Nothing at all. Who gains in this? The British. And let's be honest, that is their basic task itself. What about Zamindar land tax? Most probably the Zamindars did not have the leverage to even give that 1/11th. In principle, it looks like a good system, that the Zamindar will always take care of the land. He will make sure that the yield does not go down. He will technically try to make sure that the yield also is increased over a period of time so that his share increases. But when I can only study for 24 hours, how can I give you 32 hours of work in one day? Are you getting my point? This is so high fixed that everything will get ruined. Can I read it out? And there's nothing in the system. When we look at the three systems, you'll automatically realize why it is the worst. Okay. See. What is permanent settlement? If anybody has even an ounce of doubt, please listen to me. Why did they change the system from Hastings system? He, which is Cornwallis, realized that the existing system was impoverishing the country, ruining agriculture, and not producing large and regular surplus for the British, for the company. Company's trade was suffering because of the difficulty in procuring Indian goods to export to Europe. Company officials and European observers such as Alexander Dow, Henry Purlow, Philip Francis, Thomas Law, these are different thinkers at this point of time and officers who were involved in the company trade, they said that the only way we do it is by fixing land revenue permanently. This idea went into the making of what we call as the 1793 permanent settlement, which was introduced in Bengal, which is called assessment forever. It was prevalent in Bengal, Bihar, Orissa, Andhra Pradesh, and MP. Now the basic point was, yes, we have to go for 90%, 10%. But who do we take it out of? We take it out of the zamindars. Why? Because landlords would invest money theoretically. Listen to me. Theoretically, the landlords would invest money in improving the agriculture and land, with the state demand being fixed for the benefit the state demand being fixed whole for the benefit increase of production or anything would be transferred to the zamindar. This would technically give regular tax to the company and any benefit could be transferred to the zamindar. Simple point is, because 10/11 is fixed, any increase in revenue would go to the zamindar. But that was the problem. The land revenue, since it was going to be fixed for perpetuity, it was at the absolute maximum. 10/11th, this would be 10/11th, not 10th. 10/11th. 1/11th. 10/11th portion of revenue to the government, 1/11th portion to the zamindar, and this tax rate was even higher than the prevailing rates in England. But what is the question? Why zamindars? Cornwallis himself was from the landed aristocracy of Britain. He was imbued with the concept of landlordism being the real concept and preferring the landlords themselves. It was easier, now this is the most important point, it was easier to collect revenue from a smaller number of zamindars than innumerable peasants, and this would also create loyalty with the powerful class in the local population. And the zamindar could, in principle, sell, mortgage and transfer the right to collect revenue and ownership to his heirs or to his family if he can sustain in this model. However, how did the permanent settlement affect the peasantry? The ultimate losers of all of this is technically the peasant, who is left to the mercy of the zamindar. Customary occupancy rights are gone. They are reduced to the status of tenant. High burden assessment means the peasant was going to pay all forms of illegal cesses. And even by 1799 and 1812, the zamindar had been given the right to take away the whatever land the peasant has if he does not pay rent and give it to anyone else, and the peasant can't even move to the court. And in the long run, the condition of zamindars also became problematic, because failure of the payment would lead to the confiscation of the zamindari by the government and its sale in auction. The new purchaser would have the ownership right on it, and this is the so-called private property which they created. It is in principle pro-zamindar. However, because of the sunset law, it also became a major problematic aspect, because zamindars themselves were not able to pay this tax. In the end, this part of India went into permanent settlement, and it will literally ruin the agriculture and destroy the economy of Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa. Now, does it make sense? If it makes sense, I give you a summary and then we move to Rayatwari. Much easier. What about the enhanced production? It goes to the zamindar if you can enhance it. Okay. Yes, Zeba, that's a good question, that the peasants boycotted when Aurangzeb asked for higher taxes. Why didn't they do it here? That is the way the economy was. The zamindars were forcing the peasant to produce. See, in one word, this system is exploitative. It is exploitative. Now, just to close the loop and before we go to Rayatwari, can I repeat it again? First, you tell me, is it making sense? What is permanent settlement? First, I need your assertion. How is it 100%, 200% clear what it actually means? Okay. Now, It's clear? Let me again repeat it, and we will then move on to Rayatwari. It's all logical. There's nothing here. It's just as you need to understand what is the system which they are producing. What is the system which they are producing? Now, permanent settlement. Zamindar loses his own land. Yes, he can lose his own land. Zamindars were actually became peasants. This was the basic point. This system was so bad that Zamindars itself became peasants. Now you see, simple point. There are a certain number of Zamindars in Bengal. There are a certain number of peasants in Bengal. Zamindars are less, peasants are more. So the state would like to go with the Zamindar. Zamindars themselves are powerful previously also, so it's better. And Cornwallis himself has a bias towards Zamindars. Now, what system they produce is, district collector will go and district collector will call each and every Zamindar and say, whatever land is in your area, I am giving you the ownership of it, and also giving you the land rights to collect, or I'm giving you the right to collect taxes out of it. However, we are going to fix the revenue forever. So I would have to go for the maximum amount. The data tells us that the revenue which can be generated from all the tax land you have is 11,000 rupees. So we will take 10,000, you take 1,000. If you are going to improve, if there is fluctuation, it is all you. We want 10,000 rupees on this exact date. And if you are not able to pay that, we will take your ownership right, we will take your tax collecting right and give it to the next person who is ready to take it. And there were takers in India, anybody and everybody is ready to do anything. And very simply, peasants' right have been removed, taxation has reached 90%, and it generally considered a pro-Zamindar model is technically not pro-Zamindar. Can we move out to Rayatwari? Monica, we are doing land revenue settlements. Clear? Everybody, perfect, great. I need everybody in the session, then I move on. Then only I move on. If revenue is less, still the British wants 10,000. If 100% goes to the Zamindar part, nothing left for the farmer. Please, no one cares about the farmer. Unfortunately, no one does. That's the basic point. Zamindar can lose his own private property. Yes, Yuvraj, write your question again. The basic point of the matter is, he can lose his own property. Peasants have already lost everything. Ultimately, all power with the British. Is this clear? Can we go on to Rayatwari? Okay, Rayatwari. Zamindar can get one land only. Zamindar can get one land only means what? Zamindar would get, he can get 1 acre, 10 acre, 50 acre. It's about which area he is in. Now, yes, Dhanush, that's the basic point. I will tell you what type of question will come. Rahul, first understand the systems first. Sunset policy was to create pressure on the Zamindar, and if the Zamindar does not fulfill it, it only backfires. He can have as many rights as ownerships as he wants, does not matter. It's about can he fulfill it. It is, see, one thing should be clear in your story. The British kept it at such an amount, no one was able to pay it. You need to understand this. Okay. Now, this system started to work in Bengal. Within the first 5 to 6 years, everybody knew that the peasant is dying. The peasant was being exploited. Peasants became landless. They were poverty stricken, but no one cared. So now British wanted to introduce a system in southern India. So finally, they have been able to figure out what to do with the Madras Presidency, as it is called, Carnatic, Hyderabad sector, Mysore sector. But Cornwallis has gone back. Cornwallis has gone back, and Wellesley is here. Now Wellesley has no other option but to put permanent settlement on south. But there is a problem. There's a problem. The problem is that in southern India, there are no zamindars. In southern India, in peninsular India, though there are big landowners, there is no category of a zamindar. There is no category of a zamindar. So first problem in southern India in applying the permanent settlement, which would have been naturally there, is the absence of zamindars. You have peasants who are very, 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 very big or very, very wealthy, but the zamindars as a category are not there. As a category are not there. And the second is that the permanent settlement was not performing as per system and plan. Basically, what was literally happening in Bengal was, I take the right, get some money, sunset law comes, cannot pay it, next person takes it. Next person takes it, then he does the same, he's also good. Every year the land ownership changed. The district collector was literally signing just this year this, this year this, this year this. There was 86% of all land in Bengal had been transferred multiple times. Would this system actually benefit the British? You tell me. If there is too much sunset law breach, would it actually work for the British? No, it won't. Because again, fluctuation in amount. Some year they're getting something, some year they're getting something. Basically, nobody is able to match it only. So the system is not working, be it anything. It's not working in its larger context also, and generally also not working. And now there are two officers, Alexander Reed and Thomas Munro. These are two officers in southern India, or what we call as Madras Presidency. The presidency means it's under one president, who used to be Alexander Reed first and then Thomas Munro. So president, understand him like a governor, Madras Presidency. These two officers are Scottish. England is not one. The United Kingdom, how many countries or how many regions are there together in United Kingdom? 4. England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland. So very simply, they come from Scotland, which is a part of, which was conquered by the British, part of the United Kingdom. They are Scottish officers. And they believe that the zamindar is not important, but the peasant is important. And therefore, the system based on these three factors is called Rayatwari system. Rayat literally means peasant. So in a way, they correct their mistake, and in Madras Presidency in southern India, the district collector settles with the peasant or the Rayat, ownership to the peasant, which is called patta. Till today, if you want to buy land, you have to take a patta. Patta means that you have the ownership to the land. So, ownership to the peasant, and the peasant peasant, and the peasant pays revenue or tax directly to the district collector. Directly to the district collector. Basically, it's district collector, then it is peasant. Then it is peasant. Is this system better? Or for the democratic citizen of India, does it sound better? It sounds better. Very good ADBC, but it's about how much is the rate, and still the issue remains the same, which is, will you over assess or not? So the rate which was decided here was 50 to 60%. This is the tax rate. And basically, if you have a very good land, fertility wise 60%, if not 50%. And this could be revised at any time. Saini, what you're telling me is the feature of Mahilwari. At any time. At any time. That basically, it is not fixed forever and it is not fixed permanently. It can vary. It can vary between 50 to 60, can go up till 65, but it can be revised at any point of time. So if you look at it vis-a-vis zamindari or permanent settlement, let's try to understand this. And this is what really matters for the examination. Who gets ownership in zamindari? The zamindar, very good. And who gets in Rayatwari? The Rayat or the peasant. Very good. Tax rate 90%, 10-11. Tax rate here is 50 to 60%. Rate fixed for forever, can be revised at any time. Now, is this making sense? Can you remember this much out of this discussion? Vis-a-vis each other, everybody come on. Are you able to now make sense of these two systems? What is the basic difference between the two? Basically, they create an exactly mirror image of zamindari or peasant or a permanent settlement in the southern sector. So in principle, this is pro zamindari and this is pro rayatwari or rayat. But there is a clause, the same clause as in zamindari. If revenue not paid, ownership will be taken away and auctioned to the highest bidder. Now you see, the problem is that pro means good towards. Now the problem is that the clause remains the same in both. Not pay, and right taken away. Right taken away. Now, in principle, Rayatwari should make more sense. Rayatwari should work. But again, the issue in both of them was over-assessment. Over-assessment. What do you mean by over-assessment? The land can give you 400 rupees. The British wanted 800. That is a basic issue. And what happens is that zamindari 90% total means peasant gets, no, peasant does not get 10%. 90% is the rate of the state. 10% zamindar gets, peasant gets nothing in zamindari. What over-assessment technically does is, you will technically not be able to pay it. So the Rayatwari system was equally bad as zamindari, or what we call as permanent settlement, but a little bit better. Can I read it out of the PPT? No one cares if there is failure of the monsoons. No one cares if there is drought. No one cares about nothing. The British want their money on a designated date, and you have to pay it irrespective of anything. Is this clear? The rate of taxation is less, however, still very high in that sense. Over assessment means British ask for more than what the land can give. British set the revenue at unrealistic amount, because this 50 and 60%, 90%, that is decided by the British only. So if the British set it at a level which is technically not possible to be given, both systems are set to fail. Unrealistic targets. I'll be very clear. I'll give you a very simple example. If you will create unrealistic targets, even in your life, the same system will happen. Over assessment happens. I can study 14 hours. I can clear UPSC in 1 month. I will not study for 12 months. I will clear in 1 month. Same thing will happen. Unrealistic targets were assessed by the British, and basically both were set to fail. And both were bad fundamentally. Can we read it out of the PPT? How peasants will survive when they have zero income in permanent settlement? No one cares that. Let them die. When 5 lakh people could die in a famine, no one cares. Please remove this innocence. The British are not here to care for the peasant. Rayatwari sounds better, but equally bad. You tell me one thing. Are farmers committing suicide in India today? Yes or no? Yes? Do you care? If the farmer is today struggling to pay his share of dues, are you doing anything about that? So when in 2023 you are not doing anything, you expect the British to do anything. The painful truth is, somehow we are the land of farmers, but we don't care about our farmers. And this is what the British taught us. And we learn very good things very badly, but very bad things very goodly. Or whatever, in a bad thing very, very quickly. Simple point of the matter is, the peasant has nowhere to go. He will literally die. He will become a literal slave in this system. And the British don't care 1 ounce. They will rather shoot you than actually even listen to your problem. So the democratic notions of 2023, what fortunately the Constitution of India gave us, for what we fought for 250 years, and these peasants died for that, gives you that right. But still you don't do anything. Then why are you expecting the British to do anything? Can I now remove this innocence from this part of innocence from you? Yes. Now, when the British will do any injustice, don't think they actually have a conscience. The British have no morality, no conscience. They are here to loot, they will loot. Okay. So let's study Rayatwari. That is the unfortunate truth in this story. And you understand one thing. It will take us 100 years to realize this fact only. 100 years. 100 years. That our peasant was actually dying. This was the level of ignorance which was there in India at this point of time. See, Cornwallis expected permanent settlement, and let it sink in. Let it sink in that colonialism does not work on morality conscience. It works on destruction, on violence, and on exploitation. They don't care. Okay. Lord Cornwallis expected, I'll not call him Lord, Cornwallis expected his permanent settlement to be extended to other parts of India as well. Wellesley came to India. He gave orders of the extension of the permanent settlement to Madras Presidency, same subsidiary Alliance Wellesley. However, the problem was that permanent settlement would not work in Madras Presidency because there was no sizable zamindari class. There was a sizable zamindari class in Bengal which was not there. More than that, there was a growing disillusionment with the permanent settlement and the Scottish Enlightenment, as it is called, which is that the peasant matters was now coming through. Scottish officers such as Thomas Munro and Elphinstone, Alexander Reid, these people now started to say that we need to revise the system. There was already a perennial crisis of money in Madras Presidency, and basically that led to the genesis of the Ratwari settlement. It will be started by Alexander Reid in 1792. However, Thomas Munro was the one who actually created this system properly. Now, after they proceeded to assess each cultivator, and this is where the assessment has already been messed up, the Rayat separately, and thus evolved the Ratwari settlement. So every Rayat was assessed separately. Then Rayat is a peasant cultivator. It created individual propriety rights in land, but it was vested in the peasant rather than the zamindar. The peasant or the cultivator was regarded as the real owner of the land. They had ownership right, could sell, mortgage, and gift the land. Annual agreement was signed between the government and the cultivator, which is called patta, and the peasant could not go into a patta also. If he agrees, the title of private property would be given to him, along with the fact that he would have to give that land to give some tax to the British. Now, this was practiced in Madras, Bombay. I will show you the areas. Tax was directly collected by the government from the peasant. 50% for dry land if it is not that fertile, 60% in wetland. The rate was still very high, but not as high as the permanent settlement itself. If they failed to pay the taxes, they were evicted by the government. Here, there were no middlemen as the zamindari system, but since the high taxes had to be paid in cash only, the problem of money lenders came up in this area. And this is that this system rather created an issue which is called the money lender. The peasant does not have the capacity to pay in cash, and basically money lenders used to say, we will lend you cash, go and give it to the British. Evict means to remove. And basically this will create, there was no intermediary before this, but now they've created a debt trap. The money lenders will owe, the people will owe so much money to the money lender that the money lenders will start to now become zamindars. Basically, in theory, it sounds the right, but in reality, it doesn't. The system, therefore, looks attractive, equitable, detailed land survey, equitable quality of soil, area of field, average produce, everything. So in theory, it should be perfect. However, in reality, everything was guesswork. Everything was guesswork. It did not remove any elites. It did not remove the peasant. It created money lenders. Basically, the collector used to come and stand in front of the Rayat. He used to say, let me see your land. Good land, I think you can pay 1 lakh rupees out of this. This is the way they used to assess it. Nothing was done. Just used to look at the land. Land is good. Give me 1 lakh rupees. This is the way they assessed. All arbitrary or guesswork. They never did the detailed survey itself. They just came. this 1 lakh rupees you can give, 50% yours, 50% mine. Now the point is that land can't give more than 40,000 rupees. So in reality, the basic point of the matter is that whilst there will be changes in this system after 1816, where different duties will be combined together and enhanced power will be given to the collector, the basic point of the matter is that Rayatwari will actually only strengthen the village magnates. Magnates mean intermediaries or what we call as elites. So basically the peasant did not have the money to give to the British. So he rather went to the money lender and got the money, and that made the money lender and the smaller or bigger peasant much bigger. Basic point is this was applied to most of India. This whatever you see here, even as far as in Sindh, this part, let me highlight it for you. This part, one second. This part, all of it was under Rayatwari settlement, but the consequence was still disastrous. Who is a money lender? Bank is a money lender. Look at it like that. Hyderabad is subsidiary alliance at this point of time. Okay. Does the Rayatwari system make sense? And do you understand the contradiction in it? The crown and the people knew that they were dominating them. Now nobody knows nothing. And the people of England are not good people. The over-assessment of the British can be seen by the fact that how they over-assess the Brexit itself. They thought that they will be perfect, all good, perfect. Create 3 different PMs they've changed because of that. Leave it. The basic point is, see, simple point. Zamindar, Rayat, 90%, 50 to 60%, evicted if not paid, forever and anytime. Can we agree to this much? See, I'll tell you, Akshay, how does the money lender, you see, money lender says you take money from me. Okay. You paid it to the British. Next year you can't again pay. So you pay again. You take money from the money lender. 3-4 years you take money from the money lender. Money lender says, I'll pay back. Peasant says, I have nothing. So he says, okay, give me your land. What is going to happen? The peasant is going to become what? Money lender, this is called debt trap. Basically, he will, in both systems, he's becoming a landless labor, because here he is already automatically removed, and here he has now been removed by the money lender. Simple point is, both are exploitative systems plagued with the problem of over-assessment. Can we go to Mahalwari? If he fails to pay, his property rights will be taken away. Yes. Is everybody following? You are very silent today for some reason. Either it's making sense or it's not making sense. You need to tell me that. Okay. Great. Perfect. Now, individual peasants go and pay it in his office. Yes. Now the last of them, which is called Mahalwari. Now see, Mahalwari was the British being lazy. So the last area which they got in India, more or less, was this sector. And basically the British said, we went to the Zamindar, they were not able to pay. We went to the peasant, they were also not able to pay. So now what should we do? They said, let's do one thing. In Punjab, a district is called Mahal. It's called Mahal. Mahal means district. More or less. It's a revenue unit. The British automatically used to do one thing, which is, they said, we don't care how you collect the tax. We don't care who gives how much tax. We don't care how the money is going to come. we will fix the revenue of each and every mahal. So there are, for example, 5-6 mahals here. They say this mahal is going to give us 10 lakh rupees, this mahal is going to give us 5 lakh, 6 lakh, 10 lakh, 5 lakh, 6 lakh, 10 lakh. And now it is the task of the village headman, for example, Chaudharis and who was the headman, to collect tax. So basically, the headman would get an estimation. British wants 10 lakh rupees from us. He will say, we have 3 zamindars and 40 peasantry. Let us divide this money equally amongst us. So basically, the Mukhia would go on and saying, see, this much we have to pay. Who has the headache of collecting the tax now? The British or the headman? The headman. British said, we want money. We want money. We don't care where it is going to come from. We want money. We went to the zamindar, they were not able to pay. We went to the Rayat, we wanted to, no. We will take money, whoever is going to pay, but we fix everybody's money together. I'll give you that XY. All of these, Rayatwari, permanent is first, then Rayatwari, then Mahalwari. Simple point is, it is giving undue power to the headman, because if I'm the very khasam khas of the headman, he will give me less burden. But if I don't like the headman or the sarpanch or the mukhia or the chaudhary, he will give me more burden. Basic point is, a mahal could include multiple villages, and every village has a headman. Basically, every headman now has the task to collect the revenue from the village and give it to the mahal, we give it to the British at the mahal level. Simple point is, the British removed the headache of going to the grassroots level. So now you see, they have created 3 systems with 3 different emphasis. 1 zamindar, 1 peasant, 1 revenue unit itself. And what is even more problematic is that now what is going to happen is that the headmen will start to act like the British. So the headman could equally distribute the revenue, could not equally distribute the revenue. That is why it is believed that the Mahalwari system had the worst part of zamindari and the worst part of Rayatwari. Technically, both the worsts. It emphasizes and strengthens the headman also. It also is not basically doing anything for the peasantry. And the revenue was fixed at 66% for 30 years. Now, this is called absurd British guesswork. 3 places they went, 3 different systems. Here, I think zamindar, here peasant, here mahal. So now, the 3 systems, zamindar, peasant, mahal, 90%, 50 to 60%, 66%, forever, anytime, 30 years, and I'll make that for you. And basic point of the matter is, all have the same point. Pay up or we give it to someone else. Pay up or we auction it to someone else. All 3 have their own problems. All 3 have the same major problem. The British want to extract too much. And that is what is going to be the problem here. Makes sense, Mahalwari? Over assessment is the word. Right? Okay, great. So now we all can think like the British. So let's do Mahalwari. See. Mahalwari was introduced by a person called Holt Mackenzie in 1822. Then was made more or less ubiquitous in this sector under Lord Bentinck. The system was introduced in northwestern frontier, Agra, central province, Gangetic parts, or Gangetic Valley, Punjab, specifically Punjab. It had both the elements of zamindari and Rayatwari. The system divided land into mahals, and mahals constituted could be one village, could be multiple villages. The tax was assessed on the mahal. Each individual farmer gave his share. Here also ownership right was with the peasant. However, that could be taken away if This is the aspect related to Rayatwari. Revenue was collected by the village headman. This is the aspect related to Zamindari. So the revenue collecting right is with the headman, or ownership is right with the peasant. So basically you have now created an even more confusing system in which previously it was both with the Zamindar, both with the Rayat, now divided. This introduced the concept of average rent based on soil type. The state share was 66%, 30 years fixed. And this system was also called modified zamindari because the headman itself became a zamindar. So the peasant owns, but the headman extracts. And this is why this system was also plagued by the same problem, over assessment. The British will ask the headman to pay 1 lakh, but the peasant can only pay 50,000. So who is answerable to the British? Peasant has to pay to the headman, headman has to give it to the British. Who is answerable to the British? The headman. So the headman is going to technically over-exploit the peasantry. So some way or the other, one class is getting totally destroyed. That is the peasantry. Be it Bengal, be it South India, be it North India, be it Northwestern India, peasant is the one who dies everywhere. So why was the Mahalwari system made with the village community? Because they thought that in the long run it could work better. So these initial short-term settlements were technically not working at the level it should. So they thought that for a long run we could work with the revenue unit itself. They were based on artificial faulty estimates of productivity, and therefore revenue assessed was again abnormally high. Many of the big talukdars resisted, who were technically talukdars were the headmen in the new regime, and they were also liquidated ruthlessly. From talukdar, the British then shifted their preference to primary zamindars and the village community. And basically, though field-to-field assessment was a part of Mahalwari, it was never applied. So basically, settlement was then made with the village, and if talukdar is available, talukdar is the word who controls the taluk. So more or less, they acted like the headmen. If they are too aggressive, the British defeat them and remove them. And if they are ready to cooperate, they will be able to collect the tax. Thus, talukdar was not completely eliminated, and this joint proprietary right was the problem, that the talukdar also has a stake and the peasant also has a stake. The oppressive nature of the talukdars and maximum revenue extraction meant that the basic point of the matter was everything exploited the peasant only. The system will be revised later. However, still all guesswork, in the sense that R.M. Bird will try to go for a detailed assessment, but still it was all guesswork. The revenue was too high in that sense. So why did the system fail? In practice, the settlement never went for detailed survey itself. The survey never was able to do away with the intermediaries, and the village community was always exploited. And this is the story of the 3 land revenue settlements. And I'll try to give you a summary here if everybody is with me. Okay. Can we do that? Great. Perfect. How are these 3 relevant for the prelims examination? They can give you statement-based questions with the features. Now, if everybody is with me, everybody is comfortable, can we revise and we'll take a break? We can revise? Okay. Revenue settlement, Mahalwari, XY, nothing but Mahal. I'll give you a summary. I'll make a box here for you. Who is a talukdar? Talukdars are the person who controls the taluk. Taluk and Mahal are more or less the same. So if the headman was not there, then the talukdar was there. If the headman was there, then the headman was there. See, let's try to revise. And if you can remember this box for me, your task is done. In the mains examination, they will most probably ask you to differentiate between the system, meaning discuss the features or compare and contrast the permanent, Rayatwari and Mahalwari system. You can do that now. Once I've devised it with you, you can do that. Are you now capable of contrasting these 3 systems either way? You can do that? Perfect. Then you are on course to get very good marks in this section. Very good. Okay. Let's try to understand this whole system. One sec. I need to make it in a different way. One sec. If you're able to produce this in the examination, it would help you, because a type of question with compare and contrast is answered like this only. Okay, very good. Parameter, you have permanent, Rayatwari, Mahalwari. Okay. Ownership, right to collect tax. Right to collect tax. Right to collect tax. Zamindar, Rayat or peasant. This technically does not apply because we'll write it only Rayat only. Rayatwar or peasant. But in Mahalwari it's a split. Ownership is with the peasant. Ownership. Ultimate ownership is with the DC. That's a separate issue altogether. That's a philosophical part. What is given in the assessment? Peasant. But right to collect tax is with the headman or the talukdar. Talukdar, head of taluk or mahal. Does anybody has any problem in this first concept? Does anybody have any issues in this? You are able to understand the split concept. You are able to understand that it's Zamindar, Rayat, and there is a change. Very good. Now, tax rate, tax period. Tax rate, tax period. There could be multiple headmen in one mahal. Why not? Why not? But then the tax will be collected from each of these headmen. Okay. Tax rate, 10/11 or 90%, and 10% with Zamindar. Here it is 50 to 60%, and here it is 66%. As I said, right to collect tax does not really apply in Rayatwari. He is collecting his own tax. That is the basic point. But I don't want to keep a gap there. It will become confusing later. Forever, anytime, can change. 30 years. 30 years. I've written 10%, not 1%. 10%, 90%. Very good. Anybody has an issue here? Oh, not 30 years. 30 years. Anybody has an issue here? This should not be an issue. Very good. Now, the next is penalty for non-payment. Removed and auction the ownership and right to next highest bidder. Next highest bidder. Removed and auction the ownership to next highest bidder. Ownership and right, both in a way, and right. And headman will be removed and peasant removed from land and given to next highest bidder. So basically the system is the same everywhere, and the impact peasant become landless and in poverty. Money lenders become rich, peasant becomes landless, and the headmen become powerful, peasant, yes, you can make it in the exam, why not? Peasant becomes landless. Can we close the chapter on this now? Make sense? Who introduced this system? Cornwallis. This is Alexander Reed and Thomas Monroe. This is Holt Mackenzie and thereafter Bentinck. See, the location I'm showing it to you on a map. Basic point of the matter is this perfect? Is this clear? Come on. I can't be more precise. I can't be more clear than this. I hope that you understand all three together. All three together. Great. Just to summarize, in the end, India, there are three assessments. This is permanent settlement area. This is Mahalwari area. And this became Rayatwari area. Whatever is left in between will be added to the systems, but as of right now, this is the system. This is the system. Now tell me one thing. Can you see, and I'm teaching you a very important concept, can you see a correlation between the states which struggle today and the assessments they were in? Can you see a correlation? Basically, the area in India which today struggles economically or is what is called regionally very, very problematic when it comes to their economic viability, or have generally been second in the race for state GDP, are all permanent settlement areas. Be it Jharkhand, be it Bihar, be it Bengal a little bit, but the Western UP sector, parts of UP, Bihar, Jharkhand, Chota Nagpur Plateau. This is the problem. A lot of people think that India's inequality in states is something post-independence. Rather, it is systemic to the way the British impacted us. The worst settlement was there in the most impacted areas. Make sense, everyone? So what I'll do is that I'll leave you with this slide. You can take a screenshot, whatever you want to do. And I will be back at, what is the time? 6:35. 45. And now what we will do is commercialization of agriculture, something which everybody is so very excited about, and people say it with a spring in their leg that yes, the British did one thing good for sure, which is commercialization of agriculture. But I will tell you that what that commercialization actually meant and how it was technically forced commercialization, right? Can we take a break? Come on, 6:45. Vijay, you're writing years rather than years. You want the years in this. See, don't add the years. This is the order in which they were introduced. Permanent, Rayatwari, Mehalwari. You will add the years, it will become a little bit more confusing because they're very close to each other. Okay. 50 to 60 total produce of land. Yes, 50 to 60%. All is total produce of land. Yes, Samil, that also happened. Okay. See you 6:30, 6:46. I've taken your 1 minute, I give it back to you. Not like the British. See you. Suraj, why will the class end abruptly at Okay, welcome back. Welcome back. Why would the class end abruptly at 6:47? I'm audible, I'm visible. Okay. The break is still 6:46, so I come at 47, right? That 1 minute is included into it. Okay, now, second part of the story. The second part of the story called commercialization. Now, please, I need your attention now because I will do something which no other book is doing, no one else is creating. You need to understand something very, very important here. Can I do that? Right. See, when you talk about the British, people tend to talk about commercialization in a positive light. That our peasants move to crash crops. Commercialization of agriculture means that the peasant starts to produce cash crops. Cash crops, for example, indigo, tea, silk is also mulberry farming in that sense, pepper, cotton. It's considered something good. It's considered something good, which is that the peasant wants to produce cash crops. But when we talk about commercialization in India and British India itself, it was a culmination of two forces which were acting together, which forced the peasantry to go for commercialization. India never commercialized according automatically. It was forced commercialization. So it was a very major negative impact. And basically, the land revenue settlements are part of this larger scheme of what we call as drain of wealth. Of what we call as drain of wealth. I'll try to give you an understanding for this very simply. See, land revenue settlements have been introduced. The revenue demand in land revenue assessment is high or low? It is why, very good, high revenue demand and 1 kg of wheat goes for rupees 10 in the market and 1 kg of tea goes for rupees 50 in the market. So which crop will actually let you meet the demand by producing it? Tea. Great. High revenue demand is there. Peasant under the pressure of high revenue demand switches over to cash crops. For example, indigo, tea, etc. But what cash crop they will shift to is dictated by the British, because the English want to sell or export certain commodities need to push the peasant in that direction, land revenue settlements dictate the crop. Are you understanding the master plan here? In India, the peasant never did it automatically. This is called forced commercialization. This is called forced commercialization. Basically, the peasant did not do it as an standard impulse, but they were forced to commercialize, and this in turn will be also the reason for two things. Will be reason for the two things. Tell me, if everybody is going to shift from grain to cash crop, what is going to happen? There will be shortage of grain. And when there will be shortage of grain, it will lead to famines. But this forced commercialization is also the reason for deindustrialization, which I will tell you when I will reach deindustrialization. So basically, the British acted dumb when it came to political setups, but when it came to our exploitation, they were very meticulous. They were very meticulous. To the last point, they had planned everything out, which is that land revenue settlement will create the high demand, and this high demand will force the peasant to go to the cash crop, and we will dictate the cash crop. We will dictate the cash crop. Therefore, both aspects are getting sorted here. So the commercialization of agriculture is not an innocent good thing. You will see pros and cons of colonialism. People will say commercialization, good thing happened to the Indians. If you ask the Britishers till today, what is the benefits of colonialism? They will say commercialization. But this is all forced. This is all forced. So basically, the first process is that they are using land revenue settlement as a catalyst, pushing the peasant into a direction. And there's also one more thing which is happening is that at the same point of time, industrial revolution would be happening in England, and they want raw material. So basically, commercialization has dual purposes in the larger scheme of things. So can I make the larger scheme of things here? Can we do that? Are you understanding this process? You will not find it in books. You need to create a chain of understanding in which you understand why the British is doing what it is. Very simply, in the larger scheme of things, England needs certain commodities due to high demand, and the industries need raw material, and basically in India, land revenue settlements, certain commodities, for example, tea, tobacco, pepper, silk, indigo, opium. Now, land revenue settlements will in turn lead to poverty in peasantry, will in turn create high pressure, and they will be in turn forced to commercialize, but they will commercialize in the commodities which are needed, which are in demand. So basically cash crops produced was not a voluntary decision but forced onto the peasant. Is this making sense? Zeba, we're talking about the peasantry who are able to survive a little bit. If they become landless, more or less it's useless. Is this making sense? I need everybody's assertion, then I talk to you about the crops. This is the more theoretical, conceptual part of this discussion. Other than that, there's standard things. Simple. There is a master plan here. See, I asked you all a very simple question yesterday. Was India looted? You were like, yes, it was. Then I asked you, how was it looted? You said, so they took our money, they put it into their pocket, and they walked to England. This is what you said. But now I am telling you, it is a much more intricate process of changing the Indian economy in order to produce things which they want and the things which they demand. So the land revenue settlement is not an innocent process. It is the larger scheme which is going to make India the net exporter to the British for everything which they wanted. It is not a coincidence. Listen to me. It is not a coincidence that what they wanted, we produced. Please understand this point. When we talk about land revenue settlement creates high demand. High demand wants the peasant has to go for a cash crop which can pay for the demand. That in turn leads to the peasant to a path where he's looking for cash crops, and the British also want certain cash crops, and basically they all come together. These two things come together. The basic point of the matter is that 50, 60, 66, 90% of the demand which they have to meet can only be met by cash crops, not by food grains. And therefore, there is a convergence of two processes together, which is called the forced commercialization of India, which is commodities which they want and which they need, and basically Indians and peasantry now looking for commodities. It is how is that the moment you want to drink water, there is a shop for that water. This is the basic point I'm trying to point out here. Please understand the larger scheme of things here, the grander plan of the British in India. We tend to see these things in compartments. I'm trying to bring these things together. Not Bipin Chandra, not Spectrum, no other book is going to try to create this connection. But if you will create it, then you will realize India was not looted directly, but by so many channels which we call as drain of wealth. Are you getting my point? Tax, if you have to pay 100 rupees, it is better to produce tea because that 100 rupees can be covered quickly. Is this clear? Can we move on? Can I go to the crops now? Okay, great. Everybody has to consent. I only gave you 3 rules for this class. You have to tell me if you are following me. Simple point is that we all should be on the same page, that we understand the larger concept of commercialization. In India, commercialization did not happen. I will have repeated twice now. In India did not commercialize on its own will. Commercialization was not a positive impact. It was a forced process of conversion to the cash crops because it suited the British. So when we talk about commercialization, what is commercialization? Now listen to me. What is commercialization in India? What is commercialization in India? The concept is very simple. The process of forced shift towards cash crops by the peasantry due to unrealistic demands of the land revenue settlements is called commercialization. It's called commercialization. Cash crop is any crop which is not a food crop. Is this clear? It's called cash crop. It doesn't mean that they produce cash. Cash crop is a non-food crop. So see, I'm reading it out to you. Are you able to follow this whole chain of process? Are you able to do that? You are. Okay. See, in 1765, the directors in London wrote to the employees in India that enlarge every channel for conveying the annual produce of our acquisitions and increase the investment of our company to the utmost extent. Meaning, try to extract as much as possible. Now, Cornwallis reiterated that the value of Bengal to the British depends on the continuance of the ability to furnish a large annual investment to Europe. Again, extract as much as possible. What if farmer want to food crops? Produce food crops, but you will struggle to meet the demand. You will get evicted only. What is the purpose of this? The purpose of this is to acquire Indian goods for sale in Europe. There was less demand for British goods in India, so it had to pay it in gold and silver, as you remember. Collect taxes to cover the military and administrative expense in India and finance its export purchase. This was the larger motive in India itself. This was a larger motive. Now, why they commercialized India? Why they commercialized India? Commercialization, as I said, is very simply forced shift towards cash crop of the peasantry for unrealistic demands, and that was also in consonance with what they wanted. The two processes came together. They want cash crops. We were forced to do cash crops. Now, why commercialization of agriculture? Why commercialization of agriculture? First, the British cotton mill industry said that there is too much textile coming from India, and we will discuss this after this, which is called deindustrialization. Deindustrialize India, and they wanted to shift us to agricultural non-competing cash crops. Basically, they wanted to make sure that India can produce the raw material for the European markets. And the second is because India had been sucked into the triangular trade, which is England, China, and India. India had to produce commodities which could be either taken to China or to England straight, so that the British could pay for its Chinese part also. Did not use bullion to pay the imports, instead commercialized crops for use. Basically, they wanted commodities which could also be sold to China, so that no need to bring gold and silver. And this is what I explained to you yesterday. Very simply, Indian revenue was divided into two parts. Commercialization of crops, and crops which were commercialized were bought and sent to England. And one part was for the commodities which were there for China, and they took it to China. In China, they sold it to the Chinese, took their gold, they make tea and silk, and they take it to England. Basically, this is the triangle which was created. India, in this larger concept, loses everything, and China is technically getting what they're getting from Indian commodities. England is the net gainer. All balance of payment shifts towards England. England can take commodities also, and England can take these commodities to China, a very specific commodity which is opium, and then take Chinese commodities to England. Has England successfully negated the need for bullion? Yes or no? Yes. If you understand this point, you understand the whole process itself. So now we need to understand how and why India, or which commodities were chosen. So if they ask you a question with regards to what is commercialization of agriculture and what is the need for commercialization, you can answer that now. You can answer that now. And the perspective I have given you is unique to anything which is available anywhere else. I have actually given you one step higher than even history optional, which is understanding the ulterior motive of the British in India, which is what? Which is making their task easy in the larger perspective, So can I discuss the commodities one by one? Can we discuss the commodities one by one? We can? Come on. Yes. Great. Okay. Just to reiterate this point, what is the triangular trade? India, China, England. Commodities go like this. Commodities go like this. And commodities go like this. India loses everything in the larger process. This is called the triangular trade. Triangular trade. Okay. Just one. Perfect. Okay. Perfect. Great. Yes. Now, the first crop which is interesting here is raw silk. Raw silk. See, the British had access to Spanish, Italian, Chinese silk, but the problem is they're expensive. So Chinese silk, Italian silk, and Spanish silk are expensive. So what they wanted was that, how is silk made? Silk is made via, first you have the mulberry tree, then you grow the silkworm. The silkworm is then boiled, and the cocoon of the silkworm is technically the thread of silk. Silk is produced via mulberry farming. Mulberry is a tree on which the worm eats. It creates a shell around it, and then you boil the shell and then you get the thread itself. It's a very long process. It's a very painful process. Now, because the company wanted an alternative to this, they created the Indian silk raw material. So in 1770, the directors took up to replace Italian and Spanish silk with Bengali silk. And the problem was that the Indians did not have the right equipment to produce silk in bulk. Therefore, what they did was they introduced a new technology which is called the filiatures, so that the method of silk making was improved. And the company also coerced, meaning forced the peasantry to grow mulberry trees so that the filiatures and the cheap silk could be produced. So what is a filiature? See, in the concept is that when you have to make silk, you have to take out the thread. You have to take out the thread. So basically there's a type of pole which is called a filiature, on which the silk can be tied. This was not there in India previously. So this was a new technology which they introduced. Now, for the purpose of the examination, neither are they asking you to do a thesis on silk, or they're not asking you to write a short note on silk. The only point is, if they use the word filiatures, will you be able to associate it with raw silk? Yes or no? If they give you a match the following, you'll be able to. Then raw silk, no other discussion. Now comes opium. Opium. Do you know how opium is made? No? Yes. Oh wow. We have drug producers in India. Okay, very good. See, it's an illegal drug. Opium is not allowed. Afim, it's not a tree, I'll tell you. See, my supervisor, Amar Faruqi, is a narcotist. Everything has a history. So he's a specialist of narcotic history. So he used to always teach us how technically opium was made. So first and foremost, don't try it at home. You will get arrested. So disclaimer, don't try it at home. See, basically opium is a plant. It's called the poppy plant. You would have seen it for sure somewhere in your premises, somewhere for sure. This is called a poppy plant. Poppy plant is a plant which has a very big bulbous. So what happens is that when this plant grows, you have to take out, you go in the morning. You can only go it in the morning. You go in the morning and make a small cut on the plant, and what comes out is a small liquid. You take off that liquid and put it into water, and what you get is Afim or opium. It's a narcotic. It is technically used. It's used in medicines also. But the British wanted opium for a very specific purpose. They wanted to get Chinese silk and tea. They had nothing to sell to the Chinese. So what they did was that they illegally, I'm not asking you to go and cut the plant and take it out. I'm telling you how it is made. It's a very painstaking process. Don't do this. Come on. I'm just telling you it's a very painstaking process. Takes a lot of time to produce. Can be done in a specific period itself. The basic. I'm not repeating how it is made. Stop doing that. Never. Not doing that. The basic point is it is created meticulously. Now, you're asking me to repeat the process of making opium. No need. Okay. I will ask you to get up at 4 and study for UPSC you want. But I'm asking you to get up at 4 and cut up the plant and get Afim. You are ready to do that. Very good commitment. Okay. So, the British could not sell anything to the Chinese. So they found a way. This is your plan B. Very good. Very good. Extremely proud of you. the fact here is that the poppy plant is a meticulous, it takes a lot of time to produce even 1 kg of Afim. Now the British had to sell something to the Chinese. And the Chinese technically did not have anything which they wanted to buy from the British. So now you see how they used to do it. I would like to explain it to you how they used to do it. What they actually did was that in India they used to make opium, and the British did not take any of this opium on their own ships. They used to pay Indian traders to go via Indonesia and come to a place called Macau, which is near Philippines. They will come to Macau, and at Macau, the Indian trader would sell this opium to a Chinese smuggler. There are always good and bad people. The Chinese smuggler would then buy opium, smuggle it into China, and pay gold. Now at Macau, the British trader would meet the Indian trader, give his share to the Indian trader, and take this gold to China in their what was called the port of Canton, and buy tea and silk and take it to England. Basically, they literally drugged the Chinese to get their own commodities. But in order to make sure that the Canton is a place, in order to make sure that the onus does not fall on the British, they never used to do it themselves. The smuggling was done by the Indians for the Britishers. And once the gold was there, the Indian trader would get some part of the gold, and then the British would go, like innocent Britishers they are, with the twinkle eyes, and go to say to the Chinese, give me some silk. But basically, the Chinese were literally getting drugged because of the British urge to trade with them. So while in India, they literally destroyed the peasantry, in China, they were ready to drug them to get whatever was possible. So the purpose of opium was very, very important as a plant, because the British found it difficult to pay for tea in China. Therefore, they found a very good commodity, which is called opium. Opium is an addictive drug, and the British found it highly profitable to smuggle it to the Chinese. Opium had been produced in India in small quantities for a very long time. However, the first thing which Warren Hastings did was to technically create a contracting system in which all opium in Bengal was produced and collected by contractors of the British. So the basic point of the matter is silk sells at a very high rate, and they were ready to do anything and everything to sell that to the world. Now, do you understand the importance of opium in this story? Make sense? Great. Perfect. Now comes indigo, which is Neil. Indigo, which is Neil. For anybody who does not know it, you would know Ujala. Aaya naya Ujala, 4 boondon wala. So that 4 drops is technically exactly indigo, or now it is technically a chemical. Previously used to be indigo. So indigo is actually a leafy crop. It's a leafy crop. When you produce it and then when you boil it, it produces a blue color dye. Basically, it is a dyeing agent, which is the British were creating cotton textile, but how do you give your cloth blue color is via the indigo. So indigo is boiled over, and what is left is called the blue dye. So what you do is that you actually boil it, remove the crop, then you dry the water. What you get is a powder, which is indigo. So indigo is a very important crop at this point of time, because blue color dye was in lot of demand because of the Industrial Revolution. But there's a problem. What is the problem with indigo? Because Mohammed, they would not accept anything else. What is the problem with indigo? Yes, very good. Indigo is a very bad crop for land. It literally sucks up the fertility of land. It is a very harsh crop. Basically, it takes up a lot of nitrogen. So if you plant indigo, if your fertility, for example, was to produce 100 kgs in the first year, next year automatically it will become 90 kgs and then 80 kgs. It is one of the worst. It destroys soil fertility. So now it was about how do you produce indigo in India? And under that, there were two systems in India. Indigo production in India. Now, please pay attention. This comes in the examination quite a lot. Indigo production in India happened under two systems. One is called Nij and the other one is called Rayati. It's called Nij and the other one is called Rayati. Can I discuss these two with you? And I want 400% attention towards the screen right now. Very important discussion. We do Nij or Niji, whatever you want to call it. Okay. Now, what is Nij? Under Nij, what happens is a European comes to India. He buys land and creates an estate, creates a plantation or estate. Then he grows, processes, and produces indigo on his own land, which is that the land is technically owned by the European. But is this an advantageous system for the Europeans? No. That is why only 5% of all indigo production in India was Niji, because all the damage and cost is on the European planter. So rather they went for what is called Rayati. Let me explain to you what is then Rayati. See, under Rayati, what happens is very simple. See, the European goes to the peasant and says, I will give you an advance of ₹100 and you will produce indigo plant on a part of your land. Mostly it could be 25%, 50% mattered on the peasantry, could be 25% of the land, could be 50% of the land. And once the plant is ready, sell it at a fixed price as decided under the initial advance and pay off the advance, take a new one. Let me give you an example for this. For example, I am a planter, I am an European. I have my land, I am a peasant X. Rupees 100 has been given to me to produce indigo on this part of the land. Already, it's an advance, it's a payment upfront. But the European says that you would have to sell this indigo to me at rupees 10, as rupees 10. So this is the price which is fixed, which is extremely low, price fixed. He will sell it at rupees 50, but he will give you only 10 rupees. Now, in order to give off this 100 rupees, how many kgs do you need to produce of indigo? CSAT question, come on. 10 kgs. So you would have to produce 10 kgs. You will pay it at 10 rupees and you will pay off this loan. Now, for the first year, it will work. So, in the first year, it will work. But the second year, what is going to happen is, again he will give you 100 rupees and say, pay me at 10 rupees. But what is going to happen? Will the peasant be able to produce 10 kgs again? No. This year, the production will only be 9 kgs because indigo sucks up land. So now you go for rupees 90 and now you owe 10 rupees to the European. He will again give you 100 rupees and say 110 you owe me. You will again produce it at 10 rupees, but now it will only be 8 kgs and now you create a debt trap. Basically, every year you will owe the planter more and more and more and more money. And there will come a point that he will start to basically own your land itself. This is the problem with Rayati, but this is why the British preferred it. It creates a cascading debt problem. First year you will be able to pay it off, then you will only produce 90, 10 deficit, then 80, 30 deficit, then 70, 50 deficit. It starts to now mount on you. And there will come a point that he will not be paying you any advance, but you will be actually owing to the planter close to 100 to 200 rupees. And you can do whatever you want, but the indigo will never give you the yield to pay it off. And this is why indigo led to what are called indigo riots. It is considered the worst crop a peasant could produce. And that is why in this story, 95% of all indigo in India was produced in the Rayati system. In Nij system, the planter owns everything. It is his risk. So he could offset it by technically going for Rayati. Why did the peasant not increase the rate? Because the first year he actually met it. Next year he did not meet it. Now he is not in a position to change it. Peasants don't have power. This is the problem of the whole point. Indigo was in so much demand that the peasants found it as a good crop initially, but once it will start to take away their fertility, it will become the worst crop at the highest. Simple point is, why is it called Niji? Niji land, mera land. So I do it on my land, so it is Nij. If I do it on the peasant land, it is Rayati. Are you getting my point? Can I read this out to you and it should be clear? My own private land. See, very simple. I want to make a cake. I have my own oven. I have my own equipment. I make a cake. However, my electricity is wasted. My equipment is wasted. My oven is also wasted. This is Niji. Rayati is I go to the next person and say, produce a cake for me for 100 rupees. Here is 100 rupees. And all the tension is yours. But the problem is I know that because the electricity demand for the oven is quite a lot, it is not a good thing for me. So that person will produce, give it to me once, but after that he will go into a debt trap. That is Rayati. Shift it to the peasant. Rayati, Nij is my own. Nij is on my own. What is the profit for the Rayati? Nothing. But the peasant has been forced to do it because of land revenue settlements. Now, are you getting the point of forced here? It is forced because they don't have an option itself. They need to find a crop for which they can actually pay the demand, but they don't. The British don't give them good options. The British gives them indigo. So, very simply, this was there in everywhere in India. It was in the Zamindari system. It was there in the Deccan, more up in the Deccan sector. Explain Nij. Nij is written on the screen itself. All the damage and cost is with the European planter. He buys land, he grows, processes and produces indigo. And therefore, all is done by him. Now, thereafter, Rayati is when you do give it to the peasant. And it is the peasant's tension to do it. So can I now read everything out to you and we can just consolidate this area? Okay. Indigo is produced all over India. All over India. It's a crop which can be produced anywhere. It is a blue dye extracted from a tropical plant. It is used to color textile. Up to 1790s, much of the Western supply was from the Caribbean colonies. Basically, it was coming from the Barbados and the Caribbean sector itself. But when in the Caribbean sector, it started to decline, the indigo market in India went up. The company encouraged Europeans to settle in their territory to introduce indigo and produce it for export. Production increased rapidly. Indigo was grown under two systems in India, Nij and Rayati. Under the first, which is Nij, the planter undertook the cultivation with their own plows, cattle, employing hired labor for the purpose. And the plant was cut and taken to the planter's factory for dye to be extracted. Under Rayati, peasants cultivated the plant on their own land and had to deliver it to the factory at a fixed price. Although all the indigo was produced under this system, it had the advantages to the planter. To begin with, the price paid to the peasant was very low and he could not refuse to grow indigo. Refusal might lead to beating up, imprisonment, destruction of the crop itself. So if you wanted to come out of the system, they would literally beat you up. The planters were Europeans, maintained excellent relationship with the magistrates and European officers, so that no complaints against them could be given heed. So the peasants were compelled to grow a plant at a loss to themselves. This in turn will later culminate into the indigo riots itself. But if this actually does not infuriate you and make you angry, the basic point of the matter is the peasant was forced literally to go into the system. And once you enter this system, you cannot come out. And indigo at this point of time, they pay rupees 10, they sell at rupees 100. So it was a very extremely profitable concept itself. I don't know, Samuel, this is what is Rayati. Is this clear? Is this clear? Yes, great. Now comes cotton. Cotton obviously is needed for the industrial revolution, which is they need it for their industries. So if indigo was important crop in Eastern India, Western India raw cotton was important. Why Western India raw cotton? Why is that raw cotton can only be produced in Western India? Geography. The farmers can rebel, but they will be technically beaten up. Very good. Black soil. Perfect. Good. So basically the black soil of Western India was something which it needed. Black soil is important for cotton production. Now, a significant export to China had developed by 1780s itself, and the East India Company and the Bombay merchants now wanted to increase the supply of cotton. So by 1806, the more or less substantial territory in Gujarat, the company now started to force the cultivators to produce cotton and sell it at a price lower than the prevailing price itself. And by 1833, European merchants took the lead in this trade and paved way for the commercialization of this crop. It is only when there will be the American Civil War, where America will fight in itself, that the demand will exponentially increase. But as soon as the American supply was there, the demand will crash itself. Demand will crash itself. So when we talk about cotton, before we go to paper, cotton has always been a very important crop in India. But cotton, see, the way the British exploit you is not by cotton, is by making you sell it at a very low price. So basically, cotton could be produced as a very, very, very good crop. However, the Europeans would give a very meager amount to you for it. And basically, commercialization in reality was just the peasant being forced by the British to produce things at less than 10% of that rate. And this is why cotton, though a very good crop, was fully a problematic crop for the Deccan sector. And that is why I will discuss with you what is called the Deccan riots. That will happen because of the cotton production. People will rebel, but it will take them time to realize what is the problem. So when we talk about the main crops of the British, which they commercialized us into, indigo, cotton, silk, and opium were the four most important. And I hope you understand these four and their implications. Do you understand these four? Now, the other smaller crops were, for example, pepper. Pepper, huge demand in Europe itself. Company purchased it via hook and crook using their political power. Cultivators were prevented to sell the pepper to the French. And by late 1830s, the British private merchants had actually arrived in this sector also. And they literally started to coerce, beat up, force, and do anything and everything to get pepper at the lowest price possible. Same is the story of sugar. Sugar, again, is a dangerous crop. Why is sugar a dangerous crop? How do you produce sugar? Very good. Ruhan, what is the issue? Basically, sugarcane has two problems. Firstly, uses a lot of water. And second, once it is cut, it has to be taken to the mill within 24 hours. Because the sucrose content, the sugar content will start to fall. So the peasant received the advances and were bound to deliver sugar to the factory at a fixed price. 50-fold increase in sugar production between 1833 and 47. Prices after 1848 will fall. However, they will still force us to produce sugarcane. Though it will boom after the indigo decline. Simply, the British were so bad at us that there was import duty on sugar in London, which was coming from India. So large areas were given to the Europeans to produce sugar in eastern Uttar Pradesh. So what they actually did was, if an Indian sells sugar to the European, to the British, they put import duty on it. But if a European produces sugar, there's no import duty. This is the level of discrimination which they are actually doing. That our own produced sugar is not allowed, but their own sugar, these Europeans, can sell it for much lesser price. Much lesser price. So what is the overall impact of commercialization? Produce goods to export to Europe and to add to companies' treasury. Private English businessmen and companies remitted a lot of money to the British. And what this means is, I'll tell you one thing. Can we all agree that we understand commercialization and we understand Nij Rayati, we understand the commodities? Can we agree to this? There's nothing here really. It's all basic descriptive thing, but you understand the larger ulterior motive that is. Now, what I want you to understand is that what the British officers actually used to do, which is better? Yuvraj, you tell me. Yuvraj is asking me which is better, Nij or Rayati. You tell me which is better. Nij is not better, obviously not better. For the Britisher, it is Rayati. Rayati, everything cost on the peasant and you just get the crop. So it should be straightforward. Okay. Now what the Britishers actually used to do was that I got 1,000 rupees as my salary. So the British officers did not send 1,000 rupees back to their family. They used to buy indigo worth of 1,000 rupees, send it to England and ask their family members to receive it. And that 1,000 rupees worth of salary of indigo could be produced at 4,000, could be sold at 4,000 rupees. So basically, English businessmen, even company officials, remitted their salary via commodities. So literally they buy the word technically is that they buy our commodities at lowest, kaudi ke bhaav. They buy it at the least possible money and they sell it at 4 times, 10 times the cost in London. And this is the problem what we face at this point of time, that somehow India loses everything. We are exporting, but we don't get any return for the export itself. And basically, India was now transferring money indirectly to the British via commodities. So if this is clear, the larger understanding is that the peasants will revolt. There will be growing inequality. This was all going to lead to impoverishment. But the commercialization of agriculture was also the reason for deindustrialization. So can I talk about deindustrialization? Everyone, do we understand the connection between land revenue settlements and commercialization? Because now I'm talking about deindustrialization. Okay, very good. The more you see it, the more you will hate the British. Okay. Can we talk about deindustrialization? I give you 1 minute to breathe because this is extremely logical but important also. Okay, now see. What does the word deindustrialization mean? Deindustrialization basically means destruction of industries. But in Indian connotation, it means destruction of handicrafts or weavers. Weavers are nothing but the men and women who used to sit and make the cloth. And basically the handicrafts industry's destruction is called deindustrialization. So this word itself is problematic, but in Indian connotation, it means destruction of handicrafts and weavers. Now you need to understand how would India deindustrialize because of land revenue. Now you see. Before the British came to India, everybody is with me. You're now, I'm going into the major discussion. Yes, very good. Before British came to India, the way India had an advantage, and the thing I'm going to tell you right now is not in Bipin Chandra or not in Spectrum. It's a very good book by Prasannan Parthasarathy called Why Europe Became Rich and Asia Poor. It's a very, very interesting book. And it gives you the explanation for deindustrialization in the most interesting and most relevant way possible. And I'm giving you that understanding. Basically, what he argues and what the argument is, that in India, a weaver was never a weaver. He was both a weaver and an agriculturalist. Basically, in one season, he weaves, and in one season, he produces certain crops. See, being an agriculturalist with a weaver gives you what? Income-wise gives you what? It gives you an additional income. Yes. Basically, I have a certain income which is generated here. Certain income which comes from here. And there's an additional income which is generated here. Agreed? Yes, great, agreed. Now, the reason why Indian cloth dominated the world was because it was cheap and very cheap to produce. The fact is that Indian cloth could be produced at a very cheap rate. But the reason for this is in India, grain prices were extremely low as compared to the rest of the world. So if I had ₹1 in India, I could buy 100 kgs of rice. But if I had £1, I could only buy 10 kgs of rice. This is called the concept of grain wage. So though the income of Indian weaver is less, his real income is very high. Now here I need to discuss with you the concept of nominal and real income. Nominal and real income. Basically, I pay you 10,000 rupees. I pay you 1 lakh rupees. But the rent in the city is 50,000 rupees and food is 30,000 rupees. So though your nominal income sounds big, 1 lakh rupees, real income is high or low? Real income is low. So though when you will become an IAS officer, your salary is going to be 1,10,000 rupees, but you will get a car, you will get a house, you will get servants. So basically your nominal income is low, but your real wage is high. Now in India, though the weaver only earns rupees 20, because grain wage is extremely high, the real income of our weavers was very, very high. Basically, if our weaver earned 100 rupees and a weaver in England earned 1,000 pounds, we would still be able to produce more things and rather buy more things. You'd have heard of this concept. Called purchasing power parity, because every country has a different exchange rate. So basically you try to parity it by looking at what commodities what we can buy. So very simply, grain wage, I'll again repeat to you, because grains are cheap, grain wage is high, and because grain wage is high, nominal income is low as compared to the world, but real income is really high. Therefore, the cotton cloth could be sold at a very low rate. Are you understanding the advantage of India? There are two advantages. First, he has additional income, and second, that the grain wage is extremely high. Basically, the real income is extremely high, and he also has additional income. So he is not fully reliant on weaving as a profession. So basically our weaver is also producing food which he can eat, and because in India grains, wheat and rice were never a problem, you can buy wheat, rice at extremely low rate, and that makes your grain wage high. My wage is 1 rupee, but my grain wage is equivalent to 100 kgs of rice. So that is the concept of grain wage. Food, your income can be produced into different concepts. So my income is only 1 rupee, but my grain income is 100 kgs. So can I survive on that 1 rupee? I can survive on that 1 rupee? Yes. So therefore, isn't my grain wage very, very high? Can we agree to the two advantages which our weavers have? We can agree to this. Now, the British come to India, and the people could foresee what is going to happen. British come to India, and post 1765, there is nothing, grain wage is nothing but how much grains can you buy in a given wage. Is this clear? How much grain can you buy in a given wage? I'll write it down. Grain wage equals to how much grain can you buy in your wage. Wage means your dihadi, your money, what you get for your work. So because grains are cheap, grain wage is high, and there is an additional income, therefore real income is extremely high. Can all of us agree to this? Then I'll talk to you about what the British does. We all can realize that the weaver in India is extremely smart. He does not fully rely on weaving, and he can convert his income into food very, very cheaply. His purchasing power parity is extremely high. His purchasing power is very, very high. He's in a very good position. Yes, then I tell you what the British did. Yes, okay. Now, Weaver is both agriculturalist and he's a weaver, both. This was the first advantage, which is that additional income. What did the British do as soon as they came? Why would this cloth be sold at a cheap rate? Because you are producing it at a cheap rate. What did the British do as soon as they came into Bengal once they got Diwani rights? They introduced land revenue settlements. Now the general impact of land revenue settlement is it breaks this bond, because the land revenue is extremely high. Weaver is displaced from agriculture as very high demand. So basically, he ceases to be an agriculturalist. He now becomes a landless weaver. If you are a landless weaver, what will happen to your additional income? Additional income gone. So the first advantage, now you see how all of these are connected to each other. Please understand the beauty of this argument. The fact is that the weaver was an agriculturalist. He could be seasonally in weaving and seasonally in agriculture. But because you introduce land revenue settlement into India, by introducing land revenue settlement in India, you technically destroy agriculture, and the basic impact of land revenue settlement is landlessness. So therefore, the additional income of the weaver is gone because he cannot now rely on agriculture. The weaver only relies or cannot rely get an additional income from agriculture, only relies on weaving. Are you able to imagine this concept? What is the first advantage taken away from the weaver? Are you able to follow this? Come on. If you say yes, then we go to the second one, which is going to literally deindustrialize India. So he can be a tenant, but why would he want to be a tenant? By producing his own food, he produces his own additional income. He can become a tenant as much as he wants to. But the basic point of the matter is he still now does not have additional income. The land revenue settlement, because of the way it impacts agriculture, only displaces peasantry. A good full-time peasant is displaced. So you think a part-time agriculturist is going to survive? He's technically a part-time agriculturist. So if he was in the permanent settlement area, for example, his right already has gone away. So basic point is, be it in any area, a part-time agriculturalist, would he survive, yes or no? No. So basic point is, his first advantage is gone. But now you see the second problem. Second is very simply, land revenue settlement leads to commercialization. This we have already established, yes or no? Have we already established this relationship that land revenue settlement leads to commercialization? Yes. So if everyone will shift away from food grains, price of grains will go where? Up or down? So the increased grain price will take away the second advantage. Second advantage, grain wage falls, and now real income falls. And basically, he cannot get an additional income, and he cannot technically compete with the cheap cloth which is going to come. So if you bring both these processes together, land revenue destroys agriculture, leads to landlessness, leads to weaver having no additional income, and land revenue leads to commercialization, equals to grain prices going up, weavers real income falls as grain wage falls. Add to it cheap cloth from England produced by machines, what you get is deindustrialization of India. Now, does this make sense? How land revenue, commercialization, deindustrialization are technically connected to each other. This type of argument you will not find in books. I'm giving you a comparative edge and advantage over anyone else, because what they will do is they will teach deindustrialization separate, they will teach commercialization separate, and they will teach and what we call as land revenue settlement. But what is the poison which technically destroyed India? You tell me the starting point. What is the starting point which will destroy everything? Very good. Land revenue settlement. Now, do you realize the implication of the Diwani? Why is Battle of Buxar considered so important? Battle of Buxar led to India to come to its knees, literally, because of the land revenue settlements introduced. Land revenue settlements forces the peasant to go into a certain direction, which then forces the weaver to technically go in a certain direction. And therefore, Indian economy is fully and finally destroyed properly. Land was already gone, agriculture was already gone, now manufacturing is also gone. Land revenue equals to commercialization, equals to deindustrialization, equals to destruction of Indian economy, subordination of Indian economy to the British. Pritam, for machine-made, you need industrial revolution. India did not have the capacity for that only. You can make this flowchart. Why not? I'm giving you these things for this exam only. If you write this in the exam, you will get any day better marks than any standard other argument, because they will say, they will not create a connection. I've been doing this for 12 years now, so I know what is the standard argument given by standard things. The basic point of the matter is things done by hand, so handicraft. The simple to simple point is land revenue equals to commercialization. See, land revenue gives rise to commercialization, and commercialization in turn gives rise to deindustrialization. So basically, these are not mutually exclusive things. These are internally related to it. If the price of grain will go high, then grain wage will go down, because the quantity you can buy is less. Therefore, the second advantage also gone. Can I read it out of the PPT? And then we will go to drain of wealth and finish for today. Okay. Okay. So, what is deindustrialization? What is deindustrialization? Process of continued and marked decline in the traditional industries, and the decrease in the proportion of national income produced by the handicraft industry and percentage population dependent on it. The destruction of Indian handicrafts is technically considered deindustrialization. Now you just revise once and you will see the master plan. I'm telling you the matrix, the blueprint of how India was destroyed. I'm literally taking out the blueprint which the British showed to you and or used to destroy India. This is something which we tend to not see, and I'm trying to show it to you. Revise once and you will actually understand everything even much better. One more request to you, one small request to you is, try to explain this to your parents, friend, or anybody who's near you. If you have a pet, to your pet. If your parents can understand how the British destroyed India, then my work is done. Can you do that for me? Come on. Can you teach this to someone else? Yes? Goldfish, dog, cat, anybody. I want that your parents should have the same expression as you have on your face right now, which is to technically realize what actually happened. It's that moment where we realize that how did the British, their eyes should pop out. Which is that, okay, this is the way the British destroyed India. Right? Can we do that? Can we do that? Perfect. Great. So, weavers were reduced to the status of indentured labor or labor in that sense. They increased consolidation duty on Indian silk and calicos in Britain, which is that Indian cloth was always under duty. Add to the story even more. Free trade ideas were forced onto India, that India should open up. There should be no duty on English cloth, but duty on Indian cloth. So the weavers now are also feeling this before concept. And Yashovarman, tell it to a friend. And industrial revolution started to flood the Indian economy itself. So as much as the weaver itself is losing out, There's also this tax regime which they create in England, where Indian cloths were taxed more, and the Industrial Revolution could now flood India with very cheap cloth itself. So the technique which they use to deindustrialize India is very simple. Never encourage modernization and growth of industries, had a discriminatory tariff policy, capital goods industry, which is goods which could be sold in India at a very cheap cost, was never encouraged and promoted. And Indian industries were always dependent on British goods, which is for everything what you needed to produce, the British made sure we only produced a raw material. We never, ever technically produced anything which we could use for ourselves. Now, before we move on to drain of wealth, you need to understand this word, which is Dadni, which is called Dadni. What is Dadni? See, Dadni was much like the Rayati system. It's a system of advances given to weavers to exploit them. By the company. So under it, what happened was local merchants were given advances to procure material. So for example, a dalal is given a thing that you give 100 rupees to the weaver and ask him to produce 100 rupees worth of cloth. So the Dadni merchants had a fixed, this person has a fixed commission. They will go and procure the cloth at the cheapest rate possible. And this in turn will also lead to the local manufacturers not getting any profit itself. So the dalal gives 100 rupees advance to the weaver, and he asks the weavers to produce at a very low rate. Very low rate. He's a broker. Basically, it's exactly how Rayati works, but basically for weavers. Simple point I'll tell you. The weaver has no work to do. So a broker is going to come, a dalal is going to come, and he will say that I'm giving you 100 rupees. You produce me cloth worth rupees 100. But I will buy that cloth at only rupees 1. So I would have to produce close to 100 meters of cloth. But the problem is that the same cloth he is producing for 1 rupee goes for rupees 10 in the market. So now the weaver will also, in a way, default and fall into a debt trap. So basically, Dadni system was the debt trap system of weavers. This is the only thing you need to remember. If you see the word Dadni, just go it for weaving. Clear, everyone? Clear, everyone? Come on. Dadni system is a debt trap system in which weavers were given advances and thereafter they had to produce at a fixed cost. Very, very low. It's technically Rayati, but for a weaver. Okay. Impact, deindustrialization, what is the impact? Between 1901 and 1941, percentage population which was dependent on agriculture increased from 63% to 70%. Basically, weavers had no other option but to go into landless labor. Destruction of self-sufficient village economy, unemployment, underemployment, and modern industries never came up in India. And when they came under British patronage. What weaver get is some income. Weaver can't compete only, so he gets some income. Now, if you remember, I asked a question to you yesterday. What was the question? The question was, how was India looted? Can I tell you now how was India looted? Because now we understand the larger concept. Can we discuss how was India looted? And I will discuss this again tomorrow, but I would like you to understand it. Okay. So how was India looted? The answer to this question is through various channels. Through various channels, and both directly but more indirectly. Now I'll tell you how. Less directly, more indirectly. Now I'll tell you how. The first channel of drain of wealth was commodities. They were produced by our farmers but sold by Europeans. So basically, all trade-based profit was British merchant. So our people get nothing for what they produce. All export is British. So if there is any export income, who gets it? Who gets it? The British gets it. So the first point is that the commodity itself is a form of drain, because if we add to the income of an Englishman, it is technically adding to the British treasury. So this is the first channel. The second channel is the commodity itself, which means that basically they used the commodities to sell them in Europe and in China. So the commodity is also sold and the export is also Britisher. So this also adds to the Britisher. This also adds to the Britisher. So I told you that the first set of exploitation in India is technically commodities. Very good. Perfect. Everybody's following me this. This is what we've been doing for the past 3 hours, which is how India got looted via commodities. Now tell me one thing. If the East India Company gives dividend to its shareholders, where is that money for the dividend coming from? India. So very simply, any dividend which was transferred to the shareholder or any return on investment. For example, there was a guaranteed return on railway investment, 5%. You invest 100 pounds, we will give you 105 for sure. Any form of transfer of dividend was East India Company's revenue. What is East India Company's revenue is nothing but Indian revenue. So basically, every shareholder got a part of Indian revenue. So whilst they are using commodities, they are also using another indirect channel, which is nothing but the dividend. They literally transfer the money of India. First and second point are the same, but it's about export economy and selling. First you get export economy, export money also, but they also use it for China. Third is the fact that dividend and return on investment in London is basically Indian revenue. Yes or no? Yes? Now, the fourth and the most biggest chunk, the fourth and the biggest chunk, home charges. Home charges are salaries of the British officers, money spent on maintaining army, money spent on colonizing India. Basically, everything. If I'm giving Cornwallis 500 rupees as salary, who is paying for that? Who is paying for that? You tell me. You and me. We paid for our own colonization. And if that was not enough, something called store charges and stationery charges. The Britishers were so corrupt and so greedy. Even one pencil which they used in India was not bought here, was bought in England. Pencil, sharpener, paper, anything. Imagine that the level of money which would have been spent on stationery, store charges. If I'm buying a uniform will not be produced in India. It will be produced in England. They literally imported pencil, pen, equipment, helmet, everything. Who paid for that? We. So now if anybody asks you, was India looted like taking money into pocket? No, it was a diverse story here. This whole story you see here is technically the way India got exploited and there was drain of wealth. Basically, see, the continuous outflow of wealth from India to England without adequate commercial, material and economic compensation is nothing but what we call as drain of wealth. So the colonial government exploited Indian resources and they used it in Britain. So very simply, the first channel was the illegal transfer of company servants. They got profit, they oppressed land revenues, they transferred that. Private trade which was done by the company servants, that is also going to England. They received bribes from the Bengal princes, 50 lakh rupees. Where does it go? It goes to the British. Then it is the dividend to shareholder, any debt which was produced in India to make anything, and 5% guarantee on railways. All of this is technically the drain of wealth. It's a channel of drain of wealth. Then the worst of all was home charges. Charges or taxes that were used by the British officers who used to live in India. Pay, pension, training costs, civil military personnel, pay of Secretary of State and establishment in London. In 1922, this accounted 40% of all total revenue which was going out of India. 40% of the loot was home charges. 40%, 40%. And if you add to it store purchases, which is within this 40%, 10 to 12% was just buying stationery. Every military, civil, marine department, every department was obligated to buy in England and not in India. So basically, if you add all of these together, plus the foreign investment and the what we get, the form of return on them, European houses getting return on that, the plantations, the mines, the cotton mills, everything was about exploitation. You technically get drain of wealth. you technically get drain of wealth. Now, let me summarize everything. Are you getting this point? Are you getting my point? That basically India was not exploited, and this is the point we will discuss when we'll start tomorrow before we do education policy. And tomorrow, remember, we'll do previous year questions and we'll do a very important concept. We'll do Regulating Act, PICS India Act, Charter Act, the 3 Charter Acts. We'll do that. Basic point of the matter is commodities were transferred and that produces income. Yes or no? Yes. Dividend and return is given to the British is technically Indian revenue. Yes. Now, every Britisher who ruled us, who do you think paid their salaries? We did. So home charges. And every equipment used to colonize us was also British. So basically, we paid for our own destruction. We paid for our own destruction. Are you getting my point now? The basic point of the matter is very simple. Land revenue settlement forced the commercialization of India, which in turn forced the deindustrialization of India. And Indian economic exploitation was not a standard WhatsApp university-based message that they took money from India, that they took money from India. No. It was much more diverse and much more indirect than we think. The basic point, Shivam, is that when they are exporting, the exporter is a Britisher. When they are selling, it is again a Britisher. When they are getting dividend, then again it is a Britisher. Who rules us is also a Britisher. And who buys that equipment is also a Britisher. So, this is the story of Indian exploitation. I will see you. You can go to the webinar if you want to. I will see you tomorrow. We'll do previous year questions. We will discuss education policy, very interesting discussion again. And we will discuss constitutional development till 1858, 57 rather. And why did they buy stationery? Because Khadija, stationery industry will get a boost in England. So thank you so much for your patience. I hope that you understood the intricacies of British rule. We will revise Drain of Wealth again tomorrow. First 10 minutes, not more than that. And very simply, I hope that you now are able to understand the diversity, the nuanced, sophisticated way India was looted. So today was about understanding the larger concept. You will not find any of this in any book. So I hope that you've been able to create this understanding. Do teach it to someone. It will help you understand yourself. If you can teach it to someone and they can understand it, it means that you've also internalized it yourself. Thank you. Take care. And I will see you tomorrow again at 5. If you don't have a question, you can always go to the webinar. Perfect. Thank you. Bye-bye. Why don't Indian denied British rule by coming together if it was no ruler? Pritam, that is the basic point. It will take us 100 years to actually understand this. And one man, Dadabhai Naroji, who explained to us what was actually happening. Yes, Neil, if you want to. Thank you. Thank you. Good night. Have a very good night. See you tomorrow. Could we have avoided colonialism? It's a hindsight 2020 thing. Could we have avoided anything? Yes, why not? But it's not easy. Finished products were bought in England. Devansh, that is the basic point. That everything was bought in England. They were making sure that their pencil industry, their stapler industry, their equipment industry always had demand. And that is the basic point. Akshay, just read it. If you like it, it's okay. You don't have to ratify it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Are there any other private companies like East India Company? Chaluvadi, right now the only monopoly the British had was East India Company only. No other company was allowed to come to India. Thank you. Thank you. You can go to the webinar if you want to. Don't have a question, no issues. British dragged everything from us. Sure, why not? Can you give overview of Weaver flowchart? Basic, Khadija, Weavers had an advantage, gone because they're not agriculturalists now. And second was the fact that they had a grain wage, which was very high because grains were cheap. Grains are not cheap because the commercialization happens. So therefore, their real income falls. I will explain to you drain of wealth again, but everybody, don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. Where is the principal investment of British shares utilized by East India Company? Where, Mohammed, the question needs to be reframed. There was no something, there were extraction methods, Nidhi, but not land revenue settlements. How did Weaver grow agricultural crop at cheap cost? It's not that they were growing agricultural crops at cheap cost. They were growing something, any income was better than what they already had. Jatya, you can just print, you can just note everything down or print this, that's totally your call. Okay. I will see you. What about dividend and return on investment concepts? Sampriti, if I'm East India Company gives every shareholder 10 pounds, but East India Company income is not their own, it is Indian revenue. So therefore transferred to Britain. Okay. See you tomorrow. Take care. Bye-bye. Good night. The SMEs are there for the next half an hour, so they're there for you only.